Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 781A, and today's date is October 2nd, 2015, and the title of this episode is, If You Are Not Prepared for the Economy Crashing, Please Do So Now. Now, before we get started, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, Saturday, I'll be uploading an interview with Michael Pinto. And I don't say this often, but this is one of those interviews you need to listen to. Michael lays it out where we're headed and what is going to happen here. And if you are on the X22Report.com email alert system, I will email you, you'll get an alert, and you'll know the video is uploaded. If you signed up to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, YouTube should send you an email letting you know that video is there. If not, you can come right over to the X22 Report Spotlight channel on YouTube, and you'll see the video. Or you can just come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right, you'll see the video, and you can play it from there. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Happy Friday to every single person that's listening right here. And we know it's a Friday. Why? Because the plunge protection team, the high frequency traders, they took a market that was 250 plus points down and slowly brought it up all day long and even pushed it as far as a positive 200. Now, what makes this very interesting is, first, it's on a Friday. This is what they normally do. They make it so you go into the weekend on a positive note. Second, we received bad data, bad news. The job numbers are in. They're a complete disaster. The job numbers came in at 142,000 jobs that were added, 60,000 below the consensus. Now, of course, we understand that these numbers are manipulated. They do whatever they possibly can to boost them. But when you don't have the people finding jobs, and there are more layoffs, and they're continually accelerating, it gets very difficult to manipulate all of this. Now, of course, they might have to start making this out of thin air. Maybe they've been doing it all along. But we can see at this point, as time goes on, it's getting harder and harder to do. Look, the August print, they secretly revised it down. Remember they told us, hey, it was a pretty good month. We're going to bring the unemployment down to 5.1%. We added 173,000 jobs. Well, they lowered it down to 136,000, which is a lot worse than what came in at 142,000 for this month. So you know they're going to revise that number down further as we move into October, November. So basically, we lost about 236,000 jobs in September. Sound like a recovery to anyone? It doesn't to me. So let's put this into perspective. In 2015, job growth has averaged about 198,000 per month, compared with an average monthly gain of 260,000 jobs in 2014. But the unemployment is down at 5.1%. Think about what they've been doing and how it's getting harder and harder for them to cover this up. And as we move forward, it's going to really become difficult because we've been looking at real information. They've been feeding us manipulated information. And these two pieces of information are now separating themselves. And this is why the government, the central bankers, are in a panic. They realize this system, they can't keep this up much longer. It's getting very, very difficult to do so. So of the 142,000 jobs that were added in September, 24,000 of them were government jobs because, we need more government employees. It helps the country grow. No, it doesn't. It doesn't do anything. This is not where the growth needs to be. So if we remove the people who got government jobs, 24,000, we have about 118,000 for the private sector. And let's see where they went. Well, 78% went to low minimum wage paying jobs. Leisure, hospitality was about 30%, adding about 35,000 jobs. 25% went for education and health, which are more minimum wage jobs, with retail and temp help rounding out the remaining 23%. So what are we seeing? We're seeing manufacturing, mining, good paying jobs declining. I mean, this is a complete disaster. It's getting worse and worse as time goes on. So in September, the U.S. economy added 21,000 waiters and bartenders and lost another 9,000 manufacturing workers. That's not good. Because if we look at the trend, what are we seeing? Since the start of the Depression in December of 2007, the U.S. economy right now has added 1.5 million waiters and bartenders and lost 1.4 million manufacturing jobs. And they're expecting the U.S. to come out of this great recession in this full recovery. How in the world is this going to work? It cannot. And you can see what they had to do. They had to take the people off of the job search and say they're not looking anymore, because in September, the people not in the labor force soared by a whopping 579,000 to a record 94.6 million, up from the previous record of 94 million. So they're trying to convince us that these people, they don't want to work, and they don't want to pay for their house or apartment. They don't want to pay for their car because they don't want to have a job. They don't want food. They don't want to provide for the family. They never want to go on a vacation. They just want to sit home and do absolutely nothing. They don't want to work. They have no drive. Seriously? Are we really going to believe the government and the corporate media trying to convince us that 94.6 million people, they just don't want to work? And this is why they're out of the labor market. The participation rate crashed again. Now it slid from 62.6 to 62.4%. It was the lowest since October of 1977. And what we're seeing right now is that, according to the BLS, 53,000 part-time jobs were added in September. And we lost 185,000 full-time jobs. I guess it must be all those layoffs. But what's more interesting is we increased the number of foreign-born workers by 300%. So they are getting the low-paid minimum wage jobs. Corporations are instructed to take these illegals on first, because they don't have to get the penalty for Obamacare. And they need fresh people in the workforce to take out auto loans, student loans. They need people in the military. And eventually, over time, Obama will make them a citizen, to go onto Obamacare, because he needs 22 million people to keep Obamacare afloat, or the whole thing comes crashing down. So we have seen huge corporations laying off thousands upon thousands of people. And they're trying to convince us that everything is okay. And I see these corporate headlines in the corporate media saying that just because people aren't working doesn't mean we're not in a recovery. Really? So when people don't work, this is what a recovery looks like? I guess when retail closes down and people are laid off from retail, that's what the recovery looks like. I guess when housing starts to implode, that's what a recovery looks like. I mean, they're just trying to give any type of answer and to explain this away. But when we look, we see there are so many companies laying off. Hewlett-Packard, 30,000. Target, 17,000. This was in Canada. Schlumberger, first 9,000. Then they laid off an additional 11,000. Great Atlantic Pacific, 8,500. Microsoft, 7,800. Baker Hughes, 7,000. Halliburton Company, 6,400. Procter & Gamble, 6,000. Radio Shack, 5,400. Caterpillar, 5,000. J.P. Morgan Chase, 5,000. American Express, 4,000. And it goes on and on. And these are just the top 20 private sector job cuts. To include them all, we're in the hundreds of thousands of jobs that don't exist anymore. Where are they going to find work? This is actually worse right now than back in 2008. We are heading down this path where it's going to accelerate. Do you really think all of a sudden these other companies are going to start hiring? Think about this for a second. And I said this in my other report. We don't hear companies saying, wow, we're bringing on another 5,000 people because we're expanding. When was the last time you heard that? And I'm not talking about UPS, Walmart, Macy's for the part-time jobs that are starting for the holiday season. Because those jobs will cease to exist right after January. That is not a real job. It's not a job that will help someone throughout the year. It will help them in the short term, but I'm talking about these good paying full-time jobs. When was the last time you heard a company saying, we're hiring 10,000 people because we're expanding? We don't hear it. Actually, we hear the opposite right now. They're getting rid of the people because we're contracting. And we've given all these red flashing signals, 6 out of 6 Fed surveys telling us, yeah, we're heading into a depression. We understand manufacturing is down. Well, U.S. factory orders, well, they're flashing recession warning signs all over the place. They have dropped year on year for the 10th month in a row. So we understand why the Baltic Dry Index is falling, because factory orders, manufacturing, consumers who will go out and purchase, it's not happening. So they don't need the raw material. So they thought it was only going to be a 1.2% decline. It dropped by 1.7%. And I don't know why a 1.2% decline is good anyhow. It isn't. Actually, that's terrible. But of course, we went down to 1.7. And if we look at it month on month, we dropped 24% in defense new orders and capital goods. This is a complete and utter disaster. This economy right now is completely falling apart. It is not getting better whatsoever. And I'm going to be placing an interview with Michael Pinto on the X22 Report Spotlight channel. And on Saturday, you should go listen to it. He pretty much maps it out on what is going to happen here. And it's something that you need to listen to. And at this point, we see that the stock market, the gold, precious metal market, all completely manipulated. And it doesn't take into account the high demand for precious metals, because right now the U.S. Mint, they are seeing record silver sales in the third quarter. People are looking for physical. And this is the everyday person on the street that is looking to get their hands on physical silver. The U.S. Mint sold 14.26 million ounces of American Eagle silver coins in the third quarter. This is the highest on record going back to 1986. Dealers and mints trace the supply squeeze to a burst of buying by mom and pop investors in the United States. They see that something is wrong in the economy. They understand they need to hold silver and gold. Now, a lot of people don't have the funds to purchase gold, so they purchase silver. And we're seeing a lot of this. And all those people that are working part-time jobs who don't have the discretionary funds, it's a little bit harder. And silver right now is very inexpensive. Actually, I shouldn't even say you're buying it. What you're doing is you're trading your paper money for physical precious metals. And this system right now in no way can be sustained. According to the Fed right now, there is about 60 trillion of US dollars credit claims for the US dollar. According to the Fed, there are about 12 trillion US dollars. So the data shows plainly there are 5 times as many claims for US dollars as US dollars in existence. Why does this matter? Well, it does matter because there is not enough money to repay the outstanding debt. The widening gap between credit and money is making it more difficult to service the debt. Remember, only a dollar can service and repay dollar-denominated debt. Principal and interest payments cannot be made with widgets or labor, only dollars. And this is how this system is designed. It's designed like this on purpose, where there's always more debt than there are dollars. And as the system grows and grows and grows, it cannot be sustained. It's completely impossible. Credit-generated growth is not growth in real inflation-adjusted terms because rising GDP, which engenders an increase in money, is also accompanied by a large increase in claims on that money. Why larger? Because debt comes with interest and it cannot be sustained. It's impossible. And this is why we see everything happening right now. We need a government to create money without interest. We don't need a central bank loaning money to the government. There's no reason for it. And if somebody can give me a reason, please let me know. But why do we need a separate entity, a separate corporation, creating money for the government? And why do they have to borrow from this separate entity with interest on it? It makes no sense whatsoever. There's no reason whatsoever to have this because the Fed, which is a private corporation, is just, back in the old days, just starting a printing press and shoving paper in it and it created money. Now they're just hitting a button. It's not like they have any secret of where they get it. They just do it out of thin air. The government, under the Constitution, can do the same thing. And guess what? There'll be no interest attached. And this is what the Founding Fathers originally wanted. They knew the central banks eventually would try to move in and take over. Before the Federal Reserve, there were 3 others that tried but failed. And as the Federal Reserve was born, they didn't want to call it a central bank. They wanted to call it something where people thought it was part of the government, and that's why they named it Federal Reserve. Now, France is looking to maybe step away from the TTIP negotiations. France's junior trade minister, Matthias Fekl, has threatened outright termination of his country's involvement in the transatlantic trade and investment partnership. Why, you say? For total lack of transparency. He's saying that they have no idea what this whole thing is about. They have received no real information. They won't really let us look at it. And there is no transparency. Well, yeah, it's for the corporations. It's not for the governments. It's not for the people. This is why they don't want anyone looking at this. Now, I just wanted to talk to everyone, and we need to look at where we are right now. We see all of this information being thrown at us about the economy is recovering, everything is fine, the Fed is going to be raising interest rates, and they keep promising all of this stuff. But everything that we looked at in the last couple of years up to this point, we see how the economy has worsened, not gotten better. And everything that I mention in my reports is normally ahead of what you're going to hear from the corporate media. So when I tell you house prices are starting to come down, you're going to hear this about 4 or 5 months in the future. And we're already starting to hear this now. They're already starting to come out and say, okay, maybe housing is stalled. Maybe we're starting to drop. But you have to remember, they're telling people what we've already learned back in May. So we're much further along in this collapse. And at this point in the game, if you haven't prepared, guess what? You really need to start. You really need to make sure that you have food. You really need to make sure that you have medical supplies, toiletries, water on hand, a weapon to protect yourself, gold, silver, cash. I don't think at this point there's any time to waste. Now, is it going to happen tomorrow? I mean, we don't know. But no matter what, if it happens tomorrow or next month or 2 months or 6 months, it doesn't really matter because it's going to happen. And you don't want to be one of those people where you're running into the store going, I should have listened. Now I'm going to have to try to get bread, milk, and everything else from the market. And you're going to be there with thousands of other people racing to get the same exact thing. I mean, we've heard from many people, Bill Holter, Jim Sinclair, and many others, Peter Schiff, telling us that we are sliding into the abyss. We are going to crash. The system will not make it. And they told us that credit lines will dry up, deliveries will not happen. And at this point, we can see when we take a look at what's been happening here in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, we see from everything that's happening, everything is starting to accelerate. The central bankers, the US government, they are continually trying to keep the system alive, but one small black swan event is going to bring this entire system crashing down. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.